All right, if you clicked on this, you feel ready to do some practice questions with the history of psychology material. So you've already studied, you've already got your notes, you've already completely exhausted the terms on the study guide. So let's begin. So I'm going to show you some terms on the left, and then you're going to match it up with stuff on the right. So this is the practice. For instance, if I were eating popcorn, I would most likely be at a movie theater, etc. So always use the pause button. I'm going to move quickly. That puts you in control. The power, pause, and play buttons. You can go as slowly or as quickly as you'd like. Okay, slide number 1. Pause until you get your own answers, and then we'll advance to the answers. Okay, ready? Here we go. So Freud is credited with psychoanalysis. Galton was the first one who really asked the question, how much of our intelligence is inherited? We'll deal with that later in the semester. Watson and Skinner are both credited with the start of behaviorism. You hear a lot more about Skinner, not as much about Watson, but he really was the first behaviorist. Lashley, you don't really hear about him much. You don't also hear about the engram. You may have missed it in the text, but Lashley was looking for the engram, which was supposed to be the place in the brain that stored all of your memories. And he did not find it because, as we know now, there is no single storage area of the brain for memories. So Chomsky was the one who disagreed with Skinner and opened the door to cognitive psychology. So he looked at language development and argued that it really could not just be due to selective reinforcement of certain utterances that the child makes as an infant. There really must be more to it. So he contradicted Skinner, he worked with language development, and he really opened the door to cognitive psychology, which focuses on your cognitions of all things, what you actually think. All right, Descartes was our philosopher who was the first to say that the mind, or our thoughts, is not the same thing as just the structure of the brain. So we actually have a spirit, a mind, a soul that's not just physical. So good for him. All right, Broca's area. Broca is the name associated with Broca's area. It's the speech center. You have been able to produce speech. You need Broca's area. It's in the left frontal lobe of your brain, and we'll talk a lot more about that next week. All right, practice slide number 2. Take your time, use the pause button. Okay, so let's move on. Here come the answers. So Piaget was the first psychologist to talk about different developmental stages for childhood, and we'll have almost an entire chapter on him later. Watson, we know, is credited with the start of behaviorism. He conditioned poor little Albert, the toddler, to be afraid of soft white bunnies. Not a very nice person. Wundt, as I've said many times, was the first psychologist. He was over in Germany at the University of Leipzig, I think. He's credited with having the first laboratory dedicated to psychological investigations. He was the structuralist who was always trying to find the basic core structure of consciousness. He was a contemporary of the chemists who were finding out that there's a structure to the atom. So he wanted to find the structure of consciousness. So Maslow, obviously Maslow's hierarchy. The bottom needs would be food, clothing, shelter, health, oxygen. The next level would be things like belonging. The top is self-actualization, which few people achieve, and we will talk about him also later in the term. William James was our contemporary of Wundt over at Harvard. He was a functionalist. He didn't agree with Wundt that we should try to find the breakdown structures of the consciousness. He felt like, let's just look at what the purpose is or what the function is. He was influenced by Darwin, who just wanted to look at what purpose, in terms of evolutionary benefit, the behavior served. So William James is our functionalist who cared about what the function is of a behavior or a thought. So Helmholtz studied reaction times. If you can measure the speed of reaction of a stimuli that occurs on your foot, and then measure the reaction time for a stimuli that occurs on your thigh, you can use subtraction to get the actual speed of neural communication. Allport, he really was interested in the normal personality, not the pathological personality. So anyway, he's credited with some of the first personality tests, but you don't hear a lot about them because they're just for sort of normal people, not mentally ill. So I want to make sure you read Dr. Fo's article. There is a question on the exam about his thoughts and about that article. You can find it in the presentation section. Go scroll all the way down past all the video boxes, and there's a link to his article at the very end. All right, last practice slide. So according to what on the left, behavior is driven by what on the right. Pause till you get your own answers, see which ones you know. All right, so we're going to go on now to the next slide. So psychoanalysis believes that behavior is driven by the unconscious. Behaviorism argues that behavior is driven by reinforcements. Humanism, which is termed the third wave of psychology, or the third force, believes that behavior is driven by a desire for growth, self-actualization, and so forth. The Gestalt theory argues that behavior is driven by the big picture. They argue man as scientist is always trying to figure out how to behave to get what they want and need, and they have to be able to break down into small things and also look at the big picture. In fact, Gestalt in German does mean the big picture, the whole picture. Cognitive theory believes that behavior is driven by cognitive maps. So based on our experience in the world, we form certain beliefs about how things work and we behave accordingly. All right, thanks for watching. Good luck.